end of the class. But he told me now that I have less time and I will talk about the main topics. Right? So I prepared this agenda, then I will do an introduction about this very well. And after that, I will talk about the external data environment. And I will talk in some specification. I will talk about some specification. External data model, it's VRL, it's in Portuguese, in English. It's XBRL. Yes, it's global ledger, that is taxonomy, and the financial reporting. I will talk about two specifications, dimension and formula. This specification has the main specifications for outputs. Yes. And I'll talk about CCONF, XBRL taxonomy, that's a Brazilian project of the Brazilian National Grid. In general, the organization, activity organization, generates data that are stored at the transaction database, that is input for accounts database, that generates reporting, external reporting, and operational reporting. And reporting for statement, financial statement. That this report is input for analysis and input for operational changing to improve the actions of the organization. But in general, all these systems work with different formats of data in different systems. So we need to create interface to interoperability of the system and for changing the formats of the data. This interface increased by this equation, because it's a graph, closed graph. So if I have 4 systems, I need 6 interfaces. If I have 5 systems, I need 10 interfaces. If I have 6 systems, I need 15 interfaces, and so on. Okay? So we propose the goals. One of the goals of XBRL is use the same format in all the null systems. It's improved the interoperability between software applications. If I have the same environment, same data environment. XBRL is the source of XBRL is from SGML, Standard Generalized Mechanical Language, that was one language of the 60 years. SJML is the best of HTML. The interface in the CAP language. With HTML, I can format the way that I present the information. But teaching HTML don't provide the semantics of the data. Because of HTML is not there. So XML is XML is another language based on SGML, that was built for input semantics on the data. So with XML, I can build our own tags, our tags, and this tag has semantics. So the information that was here, software application can process it because this tag H1 don't give the semantic of the information. H1, the application understands that H1 is a tag that informs the small of the fonts. Here we can input semantic on the data. Here's a bibliography, a book, title, author, first name, last name, year. Okay.
So let me just call your attention to something. You see, you have the name of the field, and then the reverse slash, and the end of the field. So the context is sandwiched in between. So you see year \year, and you put the data in there. So in XBRL, the same kind of thing. Say year, here, with a backslash here, you put the data in the middle. And this is a generic markup language type of protocol. And XML is the mother language for what?
Yes. XML is called meta language for it, because XML gives the restriction, the rules for we build our specific language for the specific domain. So based on XML, I can build language vocabularies for each domain. So we have based on XML, chemical ML, math ML, XBRL, news ML, health ML, language, vocabularies for each domain of human knowledge. So XBRL is a subset of these three technologies: XLink, XML schema, and XML. XML schema is a subset of XML, and XLink is a subset of XML schema. I don't know if you know about that technology, but XML schema is we can do a relation between XML schema and dictionary of relational database. So XML schema, we define the structure of the XML document. Okay? And XLink, we establish a relation and between the elements of the elements of the XML elements. Okay? And XBRL, Extensible Business Report Language, is based on these three technologies. So XBRL has a specification. The specification are rules governing the creation of files that follow the XBRL standard, the XBRL standard. Based on this specification, we can construct our taxonomy. The taxonomy for the field that we apply. The taxonomy. The taxonomy is a collection of concepts covering a reporting area. A taxonomy is composed of schemas and databases. Schema is a dictionary of terms. Link base establish labels, definitions, presentation, reference, and population. It's based on XLink, the link base. So for one terms defined by the schema, we can construct labels, for example, in Portuguese, in English, in Japanese, in Chinese, in any idiom, any language. And the instance is other documents. Is the document is the result of data labeling using one or more taxonomy. Instance is the fact the data is carried out on the instance.
Okay, so XBRL instance, what is that IBM XBRL statement or the Microsoft XBRL statement. So you use the taxonomy, the link bases, and etc. to set up the rules. And then you create the financial statement, which is an instance. So you have 15,000 listed companies in the US, maybe 10,000 are subject to XBRL. Each one of them has the instance created for that particular company. And the taxonomy, although this sounds complicated, taxonomy is like a chart of accounts on steroids. So the accounts that you use, cash, accounts receivable, accounts payable, are in this taxonomy. The problem is that her company calls it cash, and her company calls it cash and marketable instruments. So you need two lines, one called cash, the other one called cash and marketable instruments. And when you're creating your XBRL statement, you have to choose which one of those they do. Because the taxonomy, the SEC's taxonomy has something like 15,000 statements, or 15,000 accounts, still that's not enough. And companies have to create what's called an extension taxonomy, is the names that they use that is not in the taxonomy. So think, very easy to think about. There is rules of building the thing, there is a chart of accounts, and there is an instance. The instance is what you finish up with there, is the document itself. Follows the rules of the taxonomy, link bases, and etc. Okay? Yes, no, maybe?
So, I have a question.
You are using one of your two questions.
So, I don't understand so when you say the XBRL, this like markup language, it intersects with the
I can't hear you, speak a little louder.
So XBRL intersects with the other markup language. What is that? You remember like
I couldn't hear what you
diagram?
said.
Yes.
Can you speak up?
So, what did that diagram with the 4 circles? I didn't quite understand it. What does it mean?
Ele quer
for-
saber o que quer dizer esse gráfico.
Yeah, what does it mean for XBRL to intersect with the other markup language?
XBRL is a specification
Okay.
that was built based on these three technology.
Oh.
Okay? And Xlink is a specification to establish relationship between XML elements and was recommended by the W3C. You know W3C? W3C is a
Worldwide
consortium.
Web Consortium.
Yeah, the
W3C.
consortium that establish recommend specification for the internet. Okay? And Xlink is a recommendation based on schema, XML schema, and XBRL schema is another recommendation based on XML. Okay?
When the web was created, was basically group web. XML, there are these two other things, which are the schemas and the links. Okay, that's the way that language is specified. Now, XBRL has its own link base and schemas.
I'll show how XBRL uses schema and Xlink. So how information is represented in XML? You have a validation schema, for example, which tags can be used, what kind of data, base, number, money. in what order and how many times it can be used in instance documents and other types of validation. The instance document is a document with sorry, I forgot to translate here. Here is a backup with
Cost
the
of
data.
merchandise.
Okay? Cost of merchandise, 15. The data are expressed with this marcation, the begin and the end of the marcation. Okay? So XBRL defines a syntax in which a fact can be represented with a value of well-defined concept. Using a concept. The XBRL syntax allows software to extract and interpret the facts efficiently and reliably. The framework XBRL is divided in two components, taxonomy and instance. Taxonomy is the concepts about the facts. And instance is the document that has the facts of the report.
I usually say a taxonomy is a chart of accounts on steroids. And the SEC picks up the most common account names and created a huge list, 15,000 entities. That could be cash and short-term instruments, inventory and et cetera, goes on and on, this list. Okay, and that's the chart of accounts.
So, a view of the taxonomy. Link page collection is a collection of extended links that provides the meaning of the concepts by the relationship between concepts and relationship between concepts and their documentation. Extended links is a definition of X-link. Here are link-based definition, calculation, presentation, label, and reference. Definition, calculation, and presentation is a relationship between the concepts defined by the...
So for example, total assets is the sum of the different things in the assets. Total current assets is the sum of those items in current assets. So that's a calculation.
Yeah, and this is expressed in a calculation link-based. Okay? These are separated documents from the XML schema document. The XML schema document is a document that will define the concepts, the terms of the concept. An instance can be supported by more than one taxonomy.
So
Taxonomy is
what is instance? Tell me in your words. What is an instance document? What's an instance document? Either.
The document that actually contains the coded data.
Contains the data for that particular company. So your whole objective of compiling into XML is to create an instance document.
okay. Yeah.
So if you have a database of New York Stock Exchange companies, you're going to have 10,000 instances of XML. Yes?
So the taxonomy can
Say
be
no if you don't understand, okay? There is no embarrassment. Even with a Yankee hat, there is no embarrassment.
I want to show an example after this slide. Okay? A taxonomy can be interconnected or modified. So we create a discover taxonomy set. It's a term that is used by the XBRL consortium, or by the XBRL specification. Because why discover taxonomy set? Because this is once the taxonomy can be interconnected and extended or modified, to validate the instance document, we have to discover the taxonomy set to validate. The DTS is a collection of taxonomy scans and databases. An instance is not part of the DTS. The bundle of the DTS can be discovered by a group of documents, instance, taxonomy, or database. Let me show an example. So I have one taxonomy base that can be extended with other elements and other taxonomy. So we can create a chain of taxonomy interconnected, and our schema can use elements defined in all of the taxonomy. So you have to discover the taxonomy to validate that in this document. So the taxonomy has a data schema and a link base. And we create the taxonomy with the definition of the XBRL 2.1 is the actual version of the specification. And instance document is based in this specification and in the taxonomy. So it's an example of one instance. The instance contains the data of a particular entity at a given time. For example, here is this data is a value for property, plant, and equipment net. This data, this element is created at the taxonomy schema. Taxonomy schema contains the description of data. Here is the creation. Why I said before that XBRL specification, the XBRL is based on the schema. Because here we use concepts defined by XML schema specification. For example, this element is an element defined by the XML schema. Name is an attribute of this element. The name of the element that I am creating is property, plant, and equipment net. It has a type. This type is monetary item type. The definition of monetary item type is in the XML 2.1 specification. The specification, the monetary item type is a type based on decimals, and they must have units that define the kind of the currency, for example. And XBRL uses the ISO to define currency. For example, the symbol that defines the currency for dollar, American dollar, is US. For Brazilian real is RL.
So do you know what Chinese RMB is?
No. Okay? So if parent type instance balance is observed and notice here is definition by the namespace XBRL-LI. It is a definition of the specification, XBRL specification. So it is a description of this data. Because this data is a data of property, plant, equipment that is defined with this structure. Okay? Link base contain descriptive data relationships. For example, I have here one kind of link base, but it's two elements of this link base. The element label is defined by the XBRL 2.1 specification. And here I have I establish a relationship with between this resource. This resource is in the English language with the name property, plants, and equipment net editing bar, ND bars. And I have another label in Spanish, propriedades, plantas e equipo, neto, saldo final. Okay? So I can establish a relationship between these two labels with these elements. So my application, when I present the application for human reader, we can present in English. If I want to present in English, I use this label. If I present in Spanish, I use this other label. Okay? Other kind of link basic is the calculation mark. Or it's calculation. Calculation, our professor said, it is a kind of a relationship between the two elements. I can say, for example, the current axis is a part of a sum for the assets.
Just for comment. So you could have these in different languages. In English, in Spanish, in Chinese, in Korean, means whatever language you want, and you would show the financial statement, you specify you want it in Chinese, comes up in Chinese. Okay? And so, in one sense, this is kind of language agnostic. It just if you specify what those words are. In any language, you got it in that language.
Okay? And here is an argument for calculation. Okay? So I can establish a relationship, for example, between property, plant, equipment, and assets total with the waste one. This means that the value, all the value of property, plant, and equipment net is part of the value of total assets. Okay?
And use optional means if it doesn't have it, don't give it an error, correct?
Here is another kind of link-based reference that we can establish a relation between a normative, one norm, one law, for example, and the equipment. For example, property, plant, and equipment reference is the subparagraph E, the paragraph 7.3, number 16 of the IAS, International Accounting Standard.
IFRS. Like you could have GAAP. And if there is a FASB GAAP announcement around that particular with the definition, you could hyperlink it to that. And therefore you could go in standard. I've never seen anyone using this. Okay, but sounded like a good idea when they do it. I can't imagine someone looking at the financial statement of a company and then going to the standards to look at the definition of the financial statement. It's a lot of work, correct?
Yes, correct. So this is the base.
I actually don't even know if there is an actual link base with every single 15,000 items on the US taxonomy with the definition. But there was a committee formed by the Big Four and some other people. The SEC gave $6 million to prepare it. I tried to get those $6 million for our research center and do it, but they didn't want us. They wanted to hire these guys, these consulting firms, consulting side of the firm, but they did this. But I don't know if they finished up with a real linkage of the 15 items. I cannot believe they did, because I don't think many of those account names are defined. The other thing is the way they define the taxonomy, the name of the account, wasn't by empirical method. What they did is they got these Big Four guys to say, oh, this account exists, etc. So I suggested, that was too boring for one of my PhD students to do it. I suggested that we go and pick up statements out of CompuStat and make a list of the ones that the account names that are being used by just picking up the text, put it in here, pick out that, and making a big list. No one did it. So, and it wasn't a very good suggestion, I guess.
So this is the best
Do
concept.
you understand what I said?
Yeah.
What is the 15,000 that I'm talking about? It's a little bit more complicated because there's a breakdown by industry and different entry points on the taxonomy. But every year, You can go on the SEC website and see this. Every year they have this big list of account names, okay? And with the years they keep adding account names, so this thing keeps growing, okay? And when you're preparing your financial statement, you find cash, what do? You go into that list, find cash, and then use the symbology that you have there and create the cash item with things like this is in dollars, this is 2017, etc. The specifications of it. Then you pick up the next account, look it up under taxonomy, put that. If you go to the taxonomy, don't find your account, what do? Cry a little bit, I'm just joking, okay? And you create an extension. Here's when we talk about the extension,
Yeah.
correct?
So this is the basic concept of the XBRL. So XBRL is XBRL is based on XML schema, it's link, and this is based on XML that are W3C recommendations. The specification.
W3C,
World Wide Web story.
World Wide Web, 3 Ws. Three Ws, consortium. What is this? Is the volunteer group that guides the internet, the guide World Wide Web. It's not exactly the internet, the World Wide Web implementation of it.
And the XBRL 2.1 spec is based on these definitions and has 4 documents. The taxonomy is in Portuguese again. The taxonomy is constructed by the users based on these documents, the link base in these documents, in this spec. And the instance XBRL is building based on the taxonomy and on the definition of this spec. This is the relationship between the specification. And XBRL is like W3C. It's a specification and control the defining for volunteers. Company nowadays is more than 650 companies and academic institutions that maintain this specification.
So this is around 20 years old now, correct? Around 20 years old.
Yes, almost
Almost 20 years old. And when they
98.
When they started, we had a meeting, and Gary Kravitz, professor from Case Western, and me went over to talk to them, and I strongly argued that the specs should be at the transaction level. But they decided to go at the financial statement level. Therefore, what XBRL representation today is a representation at the aggregate financial level. And basically, you create the reports as an extraction to the traditional financial report, now tagged by the specs that we have over there. That's one piece of the story. What has happened after that is that the SEC required companies of certain size to publish it, and a 3-year implementation scheme. Before the 3 years implementation, they have a volunteering period that around 50 companies was muscled as a volunteer XBRL statement instance. But then there was a kind of a big rebellion against it, and so they limited the size of company that had to have XBRL. They said it was too onerous, it was too expensive to create the statement. So today, when you file a financial report into EDGAR, remember I mentioned EDGAR last time? Mm-hmm. EDGAR is the SEC's repository of financial statements. You file like XML statement, really is just kind of your filing electronically, and then you attach an XBRL statement. So you really have two things. Now, what they have proposed this year is a thing called inline XBRL, which basically piggybacks one on top of the other. So you will do one filing in HTML, which also have XBRL in it. Hasn't become official, it's experimentation period. My expectation it will become official. But think what Paulo is showing here, Professor Gaetano is showing you here, is what exists today. And think about, it's very easy, it sounds complicated, it's not very complicated, it's very easy. There is the World Wide Web. Under the World Wide Web, they created this language called XML that links, allows computers to read from one to the other and know exactly what that thing is. Okay. That's how. In order to do that, for financial statement, they have to create a taxonomy, which is a long list of, like a chart of accounts. And so you can know the relationships. Within that, there is this thing called the link-based, a schema, that basically explains the logic of the thing. But when you are creating, you use a piece of software, and the piece of software helps you to identify where in the taxonomy is your account name. And you press a button and it creates that account. And you go one by one, it creates it. Or you write a program that does all one after the other, and they call the things that they didn't find. The things they didn't find, they create an extension taxonomy. It's not that complicated. But, want to hear something great? If I gave you an assignment to pick up data from XBRL in the past, or pick up the data from a company, you would have to go manually, cash it here, receivables here. Today that is imported to Excel. So you point towards an XBRL statement with an XBRL translator built into Excel. Press the button, it gives you the statement in nice Excel. So you pick up IBM, Microsoft, Hewlett-Packard, you press the three of them, you get them nicely lined up, prepared, ready for your Excel. Okay, so it's practical. Although it sounds complicated, at the end for you, it's only click and drag. So it's not that difficult.
So the goal is use XBRL in all financial and reporting supply chain. This is important for the audit, for analysis, for example, because we can build the application until the source of the data.
Let me just say one thing. When they created this at the financial statement level, I thought this thing would be useless. Why did I think so? Because CompuStat already existed. They had other things already electronic. Turned out this is useful to a certain degree. If you go and going to work for Deloitte, actually what they have is a tool based on XML instances that you look at the footnote, and it will find examples of other footnotes on the same nature to compare with. So actually Deloitte wrote a software to pick up footnotes and help the clients to compare and to use it. So there is some value to that. Other thing is helps in the value chain. So here is the company, here is the analyst, here is the government. You kind of make them together. Supposedly the SEC has a tool that actually looks at the XBRL statements and calls their attention if one of them could be fraudulent. Supposedly. We haven't seen it, they won't show it to me, but supposedly they are.
Professor, how is my plan? I will skip it. I will be briefly, right? And I'll talk about the environment that we are suggesting at our research at Salvador University. We imagine an environment, an XBRL of this data environment composed by layers. When you have the layer, the corporate environment layer with the data, and the data come from information service, accounting, financial, in finance database, and other source. This data, and we have another layer as called instruction layer. When they have E1 process, ETL process, like special information loaded to transform the data in this layer to XBRL standard. That's all of this based on service that will web servers. And here is the two layers of analysis. One is a persistent service when you have relationals and XBRL data code, like the warehouse. And here the audit service with the OLAP and data mining service for audit and analysis this data here. And here's the distribution service. All of this environment based on in a taxonomy, an XBRL taxonomy, and here a service bus to interconnect all of this service. Here we use the XBRL abstract model. XBRL, I told before about one specification, XBRL 2.1, but the XBRL technology is based in a lot of modules. One of these modules is called XBRL XBRL abstract model. Talking about this model. It's a model on the level of the database. Okay? This model is an UML approach which captures the semantic of XBRL 2.1 core specification and XBRL dimension, formula, table basic, version basic, GL taxonomy. This is other module of XBRL specification. This UML model captures the fundamental structure in design of XBRL and XBRL dimension as a standalone UML artifacts decoupled of any specific XML syntactic details. The abstract model includes use case diagrams, class diagrams, object diagrams, sequence diagrams. This model is based in two layers. One abstracted layer, the primary layer captures the semantic of XBRL and is independent of XML syntax. And the second layer is the instantiation of this layer for the semantic of OLAP and XBRL and other semantic technologies. The primary layers has 8 models. I don't talk about each of them, but has.
Maybe you could talk about the Brazilian that the government is doing. Maybe you could,
Yes, I will talk.
because of the time.
Yes. Here's the layer, like this. Here's an example of the layer, another example. And the question just this slide, Professor, because it's important for the SICONF project, right? And this is some question for you. Why we must use an abstract model? Why standard? It's not based on business rules. What is the advantage of not using a database based on business rules? Because the XBRL projects are around the world. The database constructed or built is based on this model, because this model is independent of business rules. So if the rules change, we don't need to change the database model. The taxonomy layer has two layers, global ledger and financial reporting taxonomy. The global ledger is a ledger for the transactions that represent the detailed transaction. The definition is a summarized layer. This, we pass this, is the financial, or here are some specification of this URL. I prepare a
Can you
dimension.
just go back to that one? Okay, so this is what's happening. We had XBRL proposed, and they started version 1.0. We ran an experiment in the University of Kansas, trying to create XBRL statements for 80 companies, 90 companies from 3 different industries. And we couldn't do it. It was very difficult. So we went back to the guys who designed it and said, let's see if you can do it. They could not resolve the problems we had. So they came out with version 2.0. Okay, and 2.0 had most of the things resolved, but not all of them. We continued doing that project in Kansas, and now they came out with 2.1, which basically was tested because we had tried 90 companies and it worked. Okay, and now they are going to inline specification, which is specification basically slamming the financial statement electronic recommendation with XBRL statement. So when if they find it filed inline, you only have to use a certain piece of software and you can read the XBRL out of it. You can read the statement out of it. We also think there'll be much less errors because now they are basically one link to the other. You can't make a lot of mistakes. Correct?
Correct. This XBRL has a lot of specifications. Two important specifications for the taxonomy is the dimension specification. This dimension specification, we input in the XBRL 2.1 other dimensions that was predicted in the first specification. The first specification have just two dimensions: the temporal, the time dimension, and the organizational dimension. Because I have the time and the entity. Okay? And here we can put other dimension, like we has in a data house. In formula Wikibasic, this specification we can build rules, complex rules, more complex rules that was defined here in this specification. Okay? XBRL is a project that I am working. It's not a specification of the XBRL. It's a project that we are linking the GML, the Geographic Markup Language, with XBRL to connect these two environments. Pass here, I don't talk about dimension. Dimension is this is module, other specification. Here is the specification dimension that connects with the XBRL. Formula is specification. Here is the specification 2.1 and the modules of XBRL. There's a lot of models of XBRL. XBRL is a technology that represents the complexity of the financial and account environment. And each module represents one of these complexity. That's this. This formula, just this slide. In formula, we build this formula, Xbrel format, we built a layer that's decoupled the software application by the business rules. So if I change the business rules, we don't need to change the software application because the represent of this is represented in one standard that is a formula base, and I have to just change or include, for example, a new role, to change one role of business role. We modify, change only this layer, and we didn't. We don't need to change the application software application. So one of the concepts. The example of the Brazilian project is the SICONF, the first and unique project in Brazil until now that uses Xbrel. It's a project for the public sector. In Brazil, we have a law called the law of fiscal responsibility. With the public manage has to rules or has to follow some rules, okay, and it's controlled by the Brazilian treasury, okay? And all the states and municipalities has to inform to the Brazilian rules to the Brazilian treasury his financial data, financial and account information, and he is now made by the SICONF, this system, Public Sector Accounting and Tax Information System. Not tax, it is fiscal. It's the architecture is divided in layers. We have one layer of GLL, of the basic entries, another layer of Xbrel GL, general global ledger of mapping to the summarized report this layer, and the layers of the rules based on Xbrel formula.
So basically, it's picking up data from transactions by the Brazilian government and creating a common database that contains this data, and therefore it's reasonably easy, if you obey the XBRL protocols, to read the data. We actually did a project here, Yaron Mitchell, she's going to talk about her project, and June that you already met, was to use data from the Brazilian government to do a set of anti-audit type of issues. Because they will have no idea what this condition is.
Yes, he's the architecture of the SICONF taxonomy. He's divided, is split in two layers, definitional layer and report layers. This is a kind of architecture used in projects, Xbrel projects. The definition layer, we define all the elements used by the reports, the basic element used by the report, and import the GL taxonomy. Here is the taxonomy for the reports. Here is reports of different business of the Brazilian treasury.
So you have a common set of data, okay, sitting in XBRL. And what you want to do is prepare a set of reports. So each one of those entities picks up, selects the data, picks up, and there is a standardized report. So you literally could go on a web page and click on that button, and that button would give you a report for a particular entity or particular thing. So these are, you have the instances here, it's all already organized in a way that is similar. And therefore, if you have preset reports, you choose what report you want, and you get the data into that report because they're all originally in the database as XBRL instances. It's a standardization procedure. And the Brazilian government forces companies in a thing called SPED and government entities in a thing called SICOMFI to prepare the data there.
Yes. So this is the article, and this is the definition. The current situation of the SICOMF has some challenge. Why? Because the states and municipalities are not prepared yet to send in its parallel these data. So they have some significant problems for the files, municipalities and states. So they have a high complexity of data extraction, poor data quality. So they have to manual and automated data mapping for CVS files without validating its variables of taxonomy. I will show why it is. Low interoperability between system, project, and organization, change of IT service provider, change of computer platform data models, computing platform, data model system, and all. High cost of activities, and complexity for the implementation of continuous audit and monitoring process. It is inside the field, inside of the states, the system, the state system, the state and municipality system, to send the information for the Brazilian treasury. Here's a case of the Rondônia. Rondônia is one of the 27 states of Brazil. It's a state of the Amazonia region, right? They has a system, a generation. They extract this to a text file, and this text file is input for one BI system that generates reports, and based on this report, they have one team to fill an Excel to send the information for SICOMF. This is doing manually. So you can imagine that is problem, that there is a problem here. Okay? Problem, errors, input errors, and other problems. They has 8 persons doing this manually, 8 analysts. So you are, how can I say, so dispense waste. So they are wasting the intelligence of the people just to type information.
Yeah, but that's, and the thing we showed before, a lot of difficulties. But if you go in the United States and you want reports from municipalities or from states, you have to go into a thing called EMMA, which is in PDF. So each state published any way they wanted. No taxonomy, no commonality of data, etc. And you manually would have to pick up data from 86,000 localities that there is in the United States. So if you think they are having difficulties, think about the United States. It's a total mess. And there is not even a state guidance on how to put this thing. So finishes up the Bloomberg. You know what Bloomberg is?
Yeah.
Bloomberg actually sells access. There is 2 Bloomberg terminals here in the building. Sells access to municipal data. So you can go and get some municipal data that Bloomberg picking up of the PDFs, transported it and manually classified. And Bloomberg has programs that pick up the data out of PDFs and puts it in a predefined spreadsheet. But they have to adapt one by one to make sure that they have the right name and etc. And to make things even more complicated, this is only for the municipalities and the states that have bonds outstanding. If you haven't issued a bond, Bloomberg doesn't collect. So yeah, this is a mess, but it's much less of a mess than there is in the United States. And so think about this. In the public markets of stocks and bonds, you have CompuStat, you have Bloomberg, you have a lot of sources of information, and you can do your analysis for purchasing stocks and etc. based on this data. For municipalities that has a huge volume of money involved in it, there is nothing particularly automated that you can use. So they are still using the old method that they print out statements and some analysts look at the printouts. So yes, this is implementationally starting difficult. But one of the difficulties Paulo is talking about here, I actually talk to people that are doing this, is the fact that the particular Roraima is a very backward state in Brazil, correct, Paulo?
Yeah.
It's a very backward state. So they don't really understand a lot of the technology. And so they do a lot of things manually. But there are states that have this pretty much automated. And what the central government did for SICONFI, they created a template. And literally you can just use that template and everyone files the same template. Would be quite feasible to create computer programs, pick up the database and put it in the template. And some states have done. And the central government sends people to help them to prepare their data, particularly the backward municipalities. Is that correct, Paulo?
Yes.
That's what they told me.
Yes, yes.
Bloomberg
Correct.
told me.
Yes. This problem, they have another way to send the information to SICONF that is by a CVS file, common value separate file. And SICONF internally is based on XBRL, but the Brazilian Tribunal don't send to the states to use in your internal process XBRL.
So look at this. They have the state data, in this case Roraima, with the many municipalities. They extract it as a text file. Okay, then they hire this group that creates reports.
Yeah.
And these reports are translated into XBRL. They could easily go directly if they had done so.
Yes.
And many states do that.
What's the problem? Using these two kinds of data. This will be obligatory and mandatory on next January 2018. Okay? What's the problem for using it? Because when the state, this situation I'm talking about the case of Rondônia, but it's the same situation of the 27 states in Brazil. Okay? What's the problem to use it? The problem is that when this data arrive on SICONF, they transform it to XBRL, the usual transform it to XBRL, and do the validations. The XBRL validation based on the taxonomy. If it is not in accord with the taxonomy, they send the information and they have to reprocess it.
But you understand what they did here. The Brazilian government created a standard chart of accounts, so to speak. Okay? And they are trying to force the states to obey. And they gave tools for the states, like a screen that they manually enter the data. That sounds horrendous, correct? It's not so horrendous because at the end, they are much better off than we are in the United States. because they at least will have all the data on one format to be analyzed. And the manual entry accepted just because the states haven't developed mapping between what they have internally and what the government is asking. And there are states that already have this totally automated. So if you think about this, Brazil is much ahead of the United States on this. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
But much, and this is for government. They also have the same thing for sales in the stores. They have a thing called spending. And what this is like a ledger entry, like a double entry that captures every sale made in Brazil. Actually, they are not capturing even a percentage, but that's the theory. And so in Brazil, in the center of Brazil, there will be an archive with every sale made in Brazil. And what's the purpose of this? The purpose of this is that Brazil has maybe 40 or 50% or 25% black economy. What does that mean? Is that people don't pay their sales taxes, don't pay their taxes. So what they want to do is force companies and individuals that make transactions to record this transaction and pay their taxes.
For the biggest companies, we have online invoices. So every sale you do at Brazil, they have like an online invoice. Every sale, each company has to do. Before you sell it, you send to the government to approve the sale to go back to the customer for the major companies. Which was released in 2009. It's 9 years old, 9 years running, and all big companies already use it. The small companies, if you go to a small grocery store, so, just sell for the customers, you don't have it yet. But if you buy some, how can I say, if you buy some electronics, everything a little bit bigger. If you need to say invoices for you have a guarantee, insurance, everything you do, it's online transaction. The government knows before if you are selling for another company, if this company has a trouble with his tax or thing, the government deny the sale. So if your company is not everything is right, the government, you cannot buy anything and sell anything.
And many countries are trying to copy the Siconfi SPED model. Many countries are going to copy. But in the US, this is not going to happen. Because the US Constitution was designed to protect people from government in the fields. Why was that? Because the Puritans came from Europe to the United States due to religious persecution. So they didn't want the central government to be able. So in Brazil, the IRS of Brazil can give information to another part of the government on your transactions. But in the United States, no. You could be declaring your financial statements to the bank and saying a very different financial statement to the IRS. And it would take tremendous court activity to reveal that. So the US is very segmented in information. Maybe it's good for civil liberty, I'm not totally sure, but certainly it's not very good in terms of efficiency of government operations. Other countries have much more integrated views. In Europe, there is a lot of sharing of information. In Holland, there is a thing called standardized business report. And what in Holland you do is you file one form. They used to have 3 forms. One for the Dutch IRS, the Dutch tax guys. Other one is filing on your Edgar, filing your financial statement. The third one was for statistics on your company. So what they did, they created SPR, They linked those three, and they had something like 2,000 different accounts you have to fill out the data. And they finished up reducing it to something like 400 pieces of data. And they worked with the 7 major suppliers of software in Holland to create software to the government also. And so now they have simplified tremendously what needs to be reported to the government. And it's much more homogeneous. Since then, Singapore, Australia, United Kingdom started copying the SBR model to simplify reporting. I had a PhD student here, spent 2 months looking for what forms US companies needed to prepare to the government. Not even talking about state governments, federal government. And after 2 months we gave up. There were just too many, too complicated. We couldn't create the proposed SBR for the US. But so this is very impressive. You know, it's very easy for Paulo to say this is difficult. You put your slide before, and there are a lot of difficulties. And there are a lot of difficulties, no question about it. But at the end, this will be good for the citizens, good for public good, good for Brazil. It's just Brazil is not like the US where the concentration of capital is very large, everyone has computers, everyone has reasonably decent computers, can buy software. That is much more difficult. But I think they're giving a jump, they're going ahead what we are doing in the United States. I know this is a little bit difficult for you. Certainly the schema and that type of thing that Professor Caetano showed here is not something you understand very easily. But the basic you should be able to understand, and you should understand the context of XBRL International. I personally think that XBRL in the US was fully implemented, and the social good is very limited. We could have done much better. Since then, and I have asked this guy to come here, but I'm not sure if he will make it. Eric Cohen, he is, until already ex-employee of PwC. He finished end of last month. Eric Cohen was the top XBRL guy at PwC. And what Eric Cohen did is develop a thing called XBRL GL, Global Ledger. And the idea was that XBRL much more at the transaction level, like I proposed 20 years ago. And some people are starting to take XBRL GL very seriously. And the Brazilian government actually used a friend of Eric to help. What was his name? Gianluca. Yeah, and he was consulting the Brazilian government to create this transaction stream standard.
Yes.
So,
And Gianluca was one of the creator of the GL.
yeah, Gianluca participated in those guys. So I asked Eric to come here and talk to you guys, but I don't think he will. Okay.
So to finish.
Yeah, finish it.
Last week, this is the problem. Last week, I had meetings with the 27 management, financial management of the states in Brazil. Brazil. I was here. While Mauricio was in Venice, I was here working, right?
So he sends Mauricio for a nice conference in Venice, and he has to stay here working. Yeah.
So I propose this solution for the state and municipalities. This solution, and our challenge, our bigger challenge is here. Right? Because the ETL process in January has to see specific for each company, each state, municipality. Why? Because each of these entity has his own database, organizations of database system And then, so the ETL process has to be specific. But for each, we are proposing using the XBRL abstract model to build a layer based on the abstract model. Because this is independent of the rules, the user's rules, and each one has to do his mapping to this layer, and from here to disclosure to the SICOF, we are using just standards. So it's easy. And then we are proposing to the state use this process based on web service, open source, and on the cloud for the use and the AWS. And we are proposing to they internalize the use of XBRL. They extend the SICONF taxonomy. STM é do Brazilian Treasury, right? Secretaria do Tesouro Nacional, National Brazilian Treasury. Okay? They extend the taxonomy for each state, for the specific needs of each state municipality or agency. And they, I don't know, Professor.
Charter.
No, não é charter.
Oh, no.
Tribunal de
Tribunal de
Contas.
Contas. It's a tribunal.
This is a
accounting tribunal.
Yeah,
that supervises.
this is
That supervise monitors.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a control agency, né?
Yeah,
Each,
yeah.
each state, each municipality, né?
Yes,
And
yes.
the federal government has a agency called
This is
Tribunal de Contas.
This
né?
is TCU and CGU.
Yes, yes, yes.
And each state has their own G. In the United States, in the private sector, we have the FASB that sets up the standards, and the SEC implements and polices the standards. So you publish your financial statement, okay? If you don't have an audit opinion on it, being a large publicly traded company, your stocks will stop trading because you're required to do that, and SEC forces it. If you publish a financial statement and the financial statement is wrong or something like that, what the SEC will do is issue an opinion letter, a comment letter, and might stop the trading or might force you to restate. But in the government side, the GASB, not the FASB, the GASB sets up the rules, but no one implements the rules. Okay, so state of New Jersey has their own standards, it's not GASB standards. So some states obey, some states don't obey. And by the way, federals don't have to obey GASB, they have their own standards. So it's a big mess in the US, worse than this. And what he's trying to argue here is that the data gets organized in a nice way, coherently, and that gets reviewed by the account tribunals, which are the public equivalent of the SEC, which doesn't exist in the United States. Loosely.
Okay, so this is one proposal that I did for them and to the accounts tribunals to internalize the XBRL for their process. And use creating and standardizing and harmonizing the environment. So this is some advantage. So, here in my university in the city, Salvador City.
So, what do you conclude out of this? First thing, yes. That's your second question.
Well, no, I'm going to answer your question.
Oh, you're answering my question, okay. So you have 2.1 questions. Go ahead.
Okay, so talked about how XBRL is very important as a standard to maintain uniformity across the information systems.
What he's saying is that some form of standardized reporting is very desirable for a whole set of functions.
Right.
And I think what Professor Caetano showed here is that it's not an easy implementation. And I think you got a little bit scared here with all the computer structuring Professor Caetano did here with link bases and schema and et cetera, et cetera. When I teach XBRL, it's a little bit simpler, but it's not as insightful as he has taught. But what I don't usually do, and I'm probably going to start doing it, is start talking about SPAD GNC Config. Because we ran the conference here, the Continuous Audio Conference every year, and in the last 3-4 years, we had people from SPAD GNC Config come here and show what they are doing. And it's easy to talk about the difficulties they are having, but when you see what they are accomplishing, it's very, very valuable. And will be very good for Brazil, but it's a long period of getting things to work. And in the US, we are learning that XBRL is now implemented for a certain set of companies, and we need to improve on it. And that's why they did Inline, and they will be continue thinking about this problem. Thank you very much, Paul. Okay, so we have two group presentations. Who are the groups presenting? Is that one group or that's two groups? Does he get to talk again? Oh my goodness. Okay, you guys want a break before, or shall we do a group presentation now, then have the break?
Let's do a break.
Okay, let's have a break. Okay, 15 minutes only, 3:15.
The problem with technology has not quite good. The problem with accuracy now is proof that you can actually what I
Just ready? Okay, go.
Good afternoon. So my name is Nick Yao, and these are my two teammates.
Hi, I'm Christine. Hi,
So today we're going to do a presentation on a topic that millennials are very familiar with. Millennials are those who were born between 1984 and 1994, and it's called social networking. And with the advent of our digital revolution, this thing called social networking came about as a way to connect everybody in the world, everybody you know, and be constantly connected with them at all times. So this is the agenda for today. Number one, social networking platforms. Number two, how has technology affected our brains. Number three, how can we use social media in business? And number four, technology affects our memory and sleep cycle. So these are some frequently used social media platforms. One favorite is WeChat, and WeChat stands out not only as a social media platform, but it's become a microcosm for the whole internet. So if you've ever been to China, so not only do you use WeChat to stay connected with your family and friends, but you also use it to make an appointment with a dog walker or a groomer for your pets, or call a taxi, make a reservation on a train or airplane, or use it to book a hotel room. These are all the features of WeChat. It's like everything that we do in like a dozen apps, in China they use one app. Professor, you have a WeChat account, right?
You found me.
maybe you'll have a chance to have a good personality. But if it's a goldfish, it cannot have a good personality. Everyone is unique and nobody has the same brain with others. And this is because of the plasticity and what we call it a mind. As we can see the picture, those blobbies are the brain cells and those strings are the connections between the human brain cells. And the first picture is the human brain of a newborn. So we can see from a very short time within 2 years, and the astonishing change in the not only in the human brain cells, also in the connections between the human brain cells. And so even if there are two identical twins and they have the same genes, each of them are gonna be unique because these connections are driven, shaped, and strengthened, and constantly updated by their individual behavior with their environment. And next, I will talk about how social media affect our human behavior. And first, some people think social media and the internet have negative social psychological effects, especially for younger users. For example, users often make texting and taking incoming calls as a priority over an in-person conversation. Mobile electronic devices play a pervasive role in a person's daily activities. There is a lack of attention to one's surroundings, and instead more attention is placed looking down at someone's phones and their tablets. And second, the individual develops the need to constantly check his or her newsfeed to find out what's going on in the world. The act of scrolling on newsfeeds like Facebook, there is always more being added to the feed, suggestive word, and hence no opportunity for even the momentary sense of satisfaction experience. Uncontrolled impulses with the constant checking on one's phones and their tablets. And also, the price paid for social media use. Social media can be socially isolating, like for now the kids, they stay in their rooms and use their computers to play video games. But in the past, those kids may reading their comic books, like playing with their friends outside and play with their toys. So this socialization helps prepare children for the outside world of work. And another price paid is how obsessing texting can lead to changes in humans' brain chemistry. A person gets a high from the power and initiative technology produces. The younger generation has poor communication skills, less patience, and lack the interest of staying power to take on more complex objectives. And the last one is communicating online does impact a person's quality of life, resulting in personality, shadow interactions, and having difficulty building social support. Further, quality of life is better improved when there is a face-to-face interaction with family or friend. During the person-to-person communication, so the words only take like 10%, and other factors like body language, like eye contact, and like the sound and the way they speak, and also their mechanicals. So these are the important factors to create a great personal communication. And next, Hengao will cover some social media.
So we all know about social media, and the tremendous opportunity it brings in terms of the richness of the data. There's so much involved with the data, there's so much we can learn from the data, but since it's unstructured, how do we organize it in a way that makes it meaningful for all of us? So we all make tweets. The President of the United States makes tweets every day.
Yeah.
And so I want to show you something that I learned last semester about how to analyze tweets in particular in a way that we can understand the latest trends, which tweets get the most retweets or replies, and we get to further explore this follower-followee relationship. So last week, one of Dr. Bassarelli's PhD students talked about using sentiment analysis. I'm going to take a step back and actually define what sentiment analysis is and just show you what it means, like the foundation of it. So a sentiment analysis is trying to define the feeling and the emotion of the topics. It's a technique, part of natural language processing, to understand certain aspects of a message that maybe like a direct analysis wouldn't pick up. And then text mining, so it's related to sentiment analysis, but it's like a technique where we break down like sentences or tweets down to its word and we analyze it. And we try to understand what really stands out in that tweet. So sentiment analysis, I said here, the process of distilling actual insights from text. Like let's say, one of the things that I did was analyze all the tweets with the word McMaster. At the time I was working on this piece of code, the President of the United States appointed H.R. McMaster as his national security advisor. And so I looked at all of the tweets related to McMaster and people's feelings about this person. And so if you look at the code, I basically use the Twitter API, which is basically this document that allows me to extract the tweets and analyze it. So I have to make an account, and you see that there. That's my individual account, and I pull like 100 tweets at a time, and then I look at each tweet, each status. And then at the end, I did a subjectivity and polarity analysis. But the subjectivity and polarity analysis is basically looking at whether this is fact or if this is just someone's opinion. That's the gist of it. Next slide.
You didn't tell them that this is what kind of code is it?
Oh.
Just tell them.
Okay, good. Can you go back? So this is, I wrote this code in Python, and the packages that I used was NumPy and Pandas. And so these are two very common packages that I think everybody should know, whether you're a developer or not. Like I'm not a developer, but I learned it as part of my education because for Pandas, that's what I use to build like the data frame and put the data into this table called the data frame. And that's why I inserted my data. And then I installed Twitter and TextBlob. Twitter is what I use to use the API, and TextBlob is the text mining package. Yep, so basically the top like 1/3 of the page is like importing packages into my Python the interface I'm using. And this is to set up my account to link my code to my account so that I have permission to go through tweets. Yeah, next slide.
No, just hold on a second. I don't like it about them because maybe it's important. How difficult would be this for if one of them wants to learn?
This is actually really easy. I use Rodeo, which is like a really business-friendly IDE environment.
So which one do you use?
Jupyter, Notebook. For developing Python, I use Jupyter Notebook.
Mm-hmm.
But so I believe this is for share something because in Jupyter you don't need to share the code. You share the code in a primitive format, so you can plot everything, and anyone can open just the Jupyter and don't need to run to see what is happening.
And so
Yes.
the reason I'm mentioning this is maybe enough if you're interested, like 5, okay? We can arrange a little, like 2 hours to give you the basics of Python. Maybe Professor Mauricio here can do it for you. And you say, oh, this is horrendous, or this is, I didn't want to give you any coding in this class. But in reality, it's not that difficult to learn. It's a very useful skill. And this, the reason why I asked Bell to talk about this is because they are just kind of monkey and pandas. These are preset routines that will do graphics for you, will do certain things. This is all programmed for you. All what you need to do is understand what you get out. Some of them are easy to understand what you get out, others not. Professor Mauricio is helping us to do visualization. So we have been doing a lot of things for the radar project to explain in the audit data analysis how you can use these packages and get a much better message than you get with the regular audit scanning. So if enough of you are interested, ask him, and he'll write the names up and we'll tell, and Mauricio will give you, we'll arrange sometime that you are free and give you a couple of hours on just getting started with this. And it maybe in the recruiting will be useful for you to say, oh, I can write some Python code. And you'll all be able after 2 hours to do easy Python code. Okay? So just think about that, and if you're interested enough, won't take too much of your time, and Mauricio will tell you the 3 or 4 packages that are the best to use, etc. Yes?
Just a quick question. How did you learn Python? Did you self-taught or did you learn it school?
So I took this class last semester called Business Analytics Programming with MBA students and Masters of Information Technology students, and the professor basically taught us Python from scratch. He taught us these packages: NumPy, Pandas, SciPy, TextBlock, and we didn't really have a textbook. He was like a developer who basically made like PowerPoint slides for us, and we just followed his PowerPoint slides.
And there are things like Python for Dummies or whatever, I don't know the name, but there is a whole set of these things available. Some of them you pay, some of them are videos. You just click and you see. Okay? Some of them are just textbook free or not. There's a lot of that stuff out there. And there's Python and there is a thing called R, letter R. And they are both preset packages. Now, when we work with Itaú Bank or etc., KPMG, they are fussy. They don't want us to use Python or R because it's not controlled enough. They want to use SAS or SPSS. But large majority of people, the largest libraries in the world are in these packages, not in SAS or SPSS. Okay, and I really object to that. I can't object, but I really think it's stupid that they put these obstacles when their staff could be doing very valuable things for very little cost. And don't you think so?
Yeah, they have, because they pay too much in the SaaS package, and they have to say, no, you already paid more than $1 million to use SaaS.
That's
so
right.
Let's
That's
use SaaS.
Itaú paid $1.2 million for SaaS and some hours of instruction.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe that.
They can do
Yeah.
R for free.
Very expensive. Very expensive. When last week or 2 weeks ago, Professor Brennan, who will teach your last semester class for, I think, audit to whatever, DRM, whatever the thing is called, he got the people from Watson to come in. Okay, and we think about, I was thinking about deep learning, a lot of stuff. Actually, it's the old SPSS, which is like SAS, with some deep learning on it and etc. And the guys who came, they sent 4 people here, and they were not technical, so they could finish up giving us a show that we could have done easily, meaning it's SAS. I use SPSS since I was a doctor, so tell you how long that was.
I have a lot of crash courses on free materials that I can share with if they will want
So Mauricio can give you some of the crash courses and materials, give you the direction. Okay, it's a word exercise for two reasons. You learn something that you can say in the interview. Second, you might be able to do a little analysis for yourself that's useful. Okay, and maybe a third reason is good at mental exercise. The rigidity, the formality of programming is a good thing. I always find good training for students to force themselves to program a little bit. Although many of you already have that, believe it or not, from Excel. Excel forces you formalization. Okay, sorry to interrupt. I don't count this time. I thought it was a good opportunity to talk.
Professor Miklos, I also wanted to mention, if you want to do self-learning to learn RStudio, which is the easier version of R or Python, you could search Google, usually I think the website is called statsexchange.com. You can do a sentiment analysis there. You can learn to do that. If you go on YouTube, type in sentiment analysis of Python, you get a couple of videos for that. And they also have what they call MOOCs, the online courses, like Coursera.org, and I think there's a couple of others.
Yeah, anything you reference, just ask Andrea.
One thing that I thought was really cool is I once in R, I built like this trading strategy, and I pulled data from 6,000 different publicly traded companies. I took the data from Edgar and I calculated financial ratios to value the company. And we use like Graham and Dodd, Buffett and Munger's like value, like their philosophy of investing. And then we built like this code. And so we calculate their P/E ratio, the ROE, and their earnings power share. And so these are stuff that you do is you can pull financial data and you calculate ratios. And you do it very quickly.
If you want help on how to pull the data, you have to find it here at Rutgers. I'm sure we can help you. Andrea knows how to find it, he knows it, and many of our PhD students know how to find it. And so, and actually this idea of pulling financial data from CompuStat or from Bloomberg, okay, or pulling social media data out of Facebook or some of these apps is actually a very useful skill and will distinguish you from other people applying for these jobs. Okay, and it will be very good for your mind to kind of teach you how to do something formally. I'm kind of now thinking about this, I'm feeling a little bit sorry that I didn't plan to do some of this in the course. But we'll have next year we'll have something.
So, like to pull the financial data, I used our packages QuantMod, which is like a piece of code that developers wrote, and then we just use it to pull financial data. So, like the hard stuff is already done for us by the developers. We just use it. So Python and R, they're not hard to learn. It's like command line almost. Let's move on. So what is a sentiment analysis? Well, a sentiment analysis, I take like a bag of words, let's say it's tweets, and I pull out specific words and see how often the word, and I tally up how often the word shows up. So let's say this is a document, and then this is a representation, how often the word shows up, how many times it shows up. And I can do that with tweets. I've done it with Donald Trump's tweets. I've done it Donald Trump, because there's a lot of tweets about Donald Trump on Twitter. Yeah, so I just break down the document that way.
Just one correction here. Bag of words is a technology that is used for text mining. Okay? And when we were at the labs years ago, there were really two approaches. One approach was the kind of semantic rigidity approach, whereby this is the pronoun, this is the verb, and etc. Like structure sentences. And the other one was statistical, how frequently this happens, that happens. Bag of words is kind of evolution from that. And what Sophia showed you last week is a comparison of using what she used. I think she used the Watson sentiment analysis, what she got there, with the bag of words approach. still, what you are trying to do, put this in context. What you really would like is a computer to really understand the sentence and interpret it the way she does. Computers are not that good yet. They'll be there. They'll get there sometime, and has been a whole paradigm change on how computers understand the words. I'll talk to you about this when I'm doing one of my later lectures, okay? But at this moment, they are not very good at doing that, but they are very powerful looking at very long lists of sentences and kind of match it with the outcome and etc. And they are doing that type of thing. But computers are not at this stage like that you, out of a context, can get a sentence with words missing and understand what the sentence is. Okay, so there is a big difference here about what computers can do in the semantic domain or not. As you can't do that, the solution is bag of words, sentiment analysis, where some things are pre-programmed and you already can do that interpretation.
You can also use this to build like a recommender system for movies. I think one lab that we did last semester was we used a movie lens database and we analyzed 1 million different movies and we analyzed their reviews. We also did this with like Yelp data where we analyzed each review on Yelp for every restaurant, and which is really useful because in reviews, people sometimes would do sarcasm, like sentiment analysis. The intent is to be able to pick up stuff like sarcasm. That's
Recommended, not recommended. Recommended system.
yeah, recommendation system. So this is what a polarity subjectivity graph looks like, and basically with the slice you show whether a tweet about, let's say, HR master is based on fact or is it based on opinion.
And that's based on the words. I never seen this. I was just asking Mauricio, is that based on the semantic of the words or the type of words used? How do they use it?
I think it's based on the words.
On the
You
words.
have two dictionaries to do that. You have different dictionaries to do that.
You might have a dictionary.
Yeah, what-
Hypothetical word.
Yeah, dictionaries. Is that
Maybe.
I just used the Twitter API.
Yeah.
Okay, so look at this. This is very interesting. This is very interesting. I want to follow up on this. Follow up on this. Polarity and subject. You can see it in other literatures on interpreting semantics in basically word analysis that we do, but not with computers. So he used an application. He had these two words, okay, and so he did it. And this is typical of auditing with using the package. Then you get stuff out. That's what really difficult to understand what it really says. You know, progressively you guys are going to be very good at picking up packages and extracting something. The audit analytics of the future is app-based. You are going to be able to pick up the data and use an app. What will be difficult is to understand what the app is telling you. If you remember June Day, who talked to you 2 weeks ago, June Day's third chapter of her dissertation is a recommender system to choose an app for an audit. And we think that this is going to be the big difference. I was last 3 days in Madrid talking to the Public Interest Oversight Board. And this is an holding organization to the IASB, the ethics group, and the education group. And there I put a big argument for creating the audit data standard. Why? Because the audit data standard would allow you to pick up data from many companies, getting it in one format and then apply that. Because I think to change auditing, we need to have this big, large set of apps, and you can't expect auditors to do anything more than drag and drop. I mean, that's, for 40 years people have been trying to do IT audit, and it was a very specialized type of audit. We need everyone to be able to use it. But the next problem is going to be interpreting what the app is telling you. And that's, I haven't even started looking at. Go ahead.
Okay. let's go to the next slide. The memory. So, one lady, she will talk to us about how social media affects memory.
So when it comes to shaping our brains, our environment plays a big role. And in fact, it is the thinking in response to our environment or experience and the interaction with our work that actually shapes our brains. And so that we answer that first. And it's the long-term memory. We are in an area where we have outsourced our memory such as calendar and calculators, but perhaps it's not about remembering the facts you have. It's more about how you use the information. I think all of you have ever gotten things some of you basically it is the result of a serious repeat. But the truth is that it's the extension of the information that has happened so fast. It's bringing us face to face with our brain's limitations. Just because our computer devices have perfect memories, we think we should have. Second is the short-term memory. A study using neuroimaging of 30 internet users showed twice as much activity in the prefrontal cortex of the brain compared to sporadic users. This is the part of the brain that is used for the short-term memory and quick decision-making. In situations where there's a lot of information, we have learned to skip. We are becoming eager to share signals, and the technology actually shapes our ability to scan information rapidly and efficiently. Next, I think technology affects our sleep cycles. In particular, our sleep cycles are affected by bright light from screens, tricking our brain into thinking this is still daylight, causing sleep difficulties, and that can affect our body.
Can I just make a comment? Very good. Just want to make a comment. Short-term, medium-term, long-term memories are some of the. There is a period on your sleep whereby there is very intense brain activity. When you are sleeping the deepest, and they don't know this for sure, but they think what your brain is doing is a cleanup. It's picking up short-term memory stuff that you don't need, it perceives as an algorithm not to need, and cleaning it up and putting something in the medium and long-term memory. And in there is a couple of books about the treatment of prisoners of war in Korea, and one of the techniques of torture was just sleep deprivation. And the theories are basically by a guy called Curtis. The theory is that if you deprive of sleep, you don't do the cleanup. And then what happened is the prisoners became very, this wasn't beatings or etc., just sleep deprivation. And basically you get disoriented because your short-term memory wasn't cleaned up and therefore is occupied. That's kind of the way they think of this.
Oh, so another professor at the Rutgers Business School, she came out with a book, and it's about how smartphones, well, nowadays, most of us are using our smartphones to go on Facebook. Every time we get get a notification on Facebook, our brain releases a chemical called dopamine, and that's a high feeling that we get, whether it's drugs or social media. So, whenever we get a notification, our brain releases dopamine. And so that's why we feel an urge to check our messages or our notifications.
So what do you guys think?
Yeah.
So for data mining, one of the things you mentioned was he's a big target with Donald Trump and Twitter. So estimates place the number of robot accounts that follow him at about 50% of his followers. So with that in mind, how accurate can data mining be if, let's say, you're mining the responses of his followers and half of them aren't even real people?
Well, it looks at everything. Well, I don't see everything, but like I can write code that goes through everything. So I have a pretty large sample size. I think online, when I was running it, it said they had like a 95% accuracy.
You're talking about robot postings? Is that what you're talking about?
Right. So there's a lot of fake Twitter bots on the internet. How can they skew data if there can be such a large percentage of specific populations?
It's possible to know if it's a computer based or not.
Okay.
You can apply some statistical tests. You can see. When you get filters in this kind of API, you have a lot of metadata. So there's some news they saw some Donald Trump tweets. So they say, oh, this was posted from iPhone, this was posted on Android. So they say, oh no, this is Donald Trump who tweets. No, this is his team. So you can do some analysis. You can see if this is a robot or no. You can see you can analyze the tweets. You can analyze a lot of things. You just have to imagination, try to do and see what you get from this analysis. It's a lot of things.
I don't know if they have already done that, but biometrics looks at your pupils, look at your voice, and etc. And they say that actually each person has their own rhythm of key strokes, which is probably true also with cell phones. Okay? I wonder if anyone had done an analysis at the frequency of keystrokes to identify if it was Donald or not.
The keystrokes, no, they saw what device. Let's say that.
Just devices.
Device.
Because the
they-
device
yeah,
when
they-
that's
because they say, because he uses iPhone, and there is a lot of tweets who are posted by Android or another system. So they knew that it was, and they make it compare. They made some segmental analysis compare the difference between the tweets. It's I believe you are trying to promise.
I think Twitter actually makes it harder for people to make fake accounts because you have to put your phone number in. You have to add your phone number when you make your account. And then they automatically enable like two-factor authentication. That way somebody can't just get in your account when they have your password. They would also need your phone. So we're moving towards like two-factor authentication. Like Rutgers has NID++. So even if somebody has a password, you can't get into my account because they don't have my phone.
I wonder if you can just simulate the place that they are there. If someone really wants to fake someone else's, if you could, for example, pick up the.
If they are not fake someone.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying you'll be able to get in with double-factor authentication because that needs a response.
Right.
But if you're sending emails and doing tweets and passing them around, the trailer of the tweet, that one can be verified.
Yeah.
Do you think this is technical? You are going to be, as auditors, soon having to verify things. And this is what's coming. I don't know how much of it's coming and how many apps will be there to help you, but this is what's coming eventually.
I don't know if you guys use like there's like a website. It's called, it basically, you put in your Facebook account, your Twitter account, and it will actually show you which words you use the most, which topics you're always talking about, and it'll rate it. And I'm guessing on the back end, they're using a sentiment analysis.
Yes, and this kind of story, and not even verbal, this is kind of verbal profiling, as they call it. And there is a whole part in psychology and in basically verbal analysis that you try to identify the patterns of speech or etc. of an individual. And it's very interesting that with the emergence of social media, many of these technologies that were in psychology or in other areas are starting to kind of merge in and be used for this type of analysis. It's very difficult to predict where it's going, but it's very interesting. And 20 years later, auditors will start using it. It's very, very slow, the process. I just want to make one more comment. The slide that you showed on brain development, that's very interesting. I've never seen that before.
So it's an idea of the famous neuroscientist named Susan Greenfield.
That's very interesting.
Her idea is about, she had a book named Mind Changing, but so what she says is very controversial. So some people agree with her ideas, and some people disagree with her ideas.
Have you guys seen, I sent you the National Geographic, did you get it?
Yes.
On the brain structures, did you get those things?
Yeah.
Okay, there they dissected the brains of a mouse with very, very thin slices and showed the neural network like you were showing that. And I wonder if they ever tried to do that to verify those theories, look at those linkages, see if it's really true that they get into that. Very interesting. And so we're learning something. This is why I like third class presentations, because every time I take myself notes, I learn something. And two things for you to remember in the presentations. One, that you are being paid. If you said something you don't like, you want to change, just ask the lady. She will eliminate that. That's number one. The second thing is that you are being recorded. Okay, if you have objections to being recorded, we have to talk. Okay? But thank you very much.
Oh, so I just want to say that I use this website called datacamp.com, and so that's what I use to keep learning about some of this stuff, is just go through their tutorials, and they have really good tutorials, and they actually teach you how to use data science for finance, marketing, accounting, and they teach you R and Python, just R and Python.
What's the website called?
Datacamp.
Data Camp?
Datacamp.
He sent me the link. I hadn't seen it before, and it's quite nice.
Should have just,
Yeah, you showed me last year. I know.
they have some good free edition something that's pretty good. I think they have something for students. You can see I want to use my class, and you can give 6 months free account for every student.
Yeah, you get free accounts if you want to do it. Same thing with Tableau, you can get free
Yeah.
account. Many of them, the reason for giving free accounts to students is to get when you are professionals to pay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, guys.
Actually, the professor, he assigned us assignment in data camp. It was the first week he wanted us to go hard, right away, so he assigned us stuff in data camp. But you could do that to teachers.
Okay, let's do the next group presentation, and then if there is a bit time left, I want to do a little bit of lecture. How about that?
All right.
Thank you, good job, guys.
No
And
problem.
thank you for being the courageous first.
No problem. No problem.
Professor, could I ask the two to speak up, project their voice so that the microphone can pick up what you're saying for your presentations? Thank you.
All right, so today we're going to talk to you about the classroom of the future, and how virtual and online learning is modernizing education. So to understand how this is working today, we need to go through some of the history on online learning. So I'll go through the highlights. So in 1960 at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, Dr. Bitzer developed something called Plato. It's a programmed logic for automating teaching operations. This was the first ever computer-assisted instruction system, and it was the first instance of a lot of the modern aspects of online learning. They had, I believe, message boards and online testing capabilities. In 1962, Douglas Engelbart, he was an internet pioneer. He published something called Augmenting Human Intelligence, a conceptual framework, and this basically was the first written suggestion that we use computers for training and learning purposes. And then in 1968, he put this into action. He created something called the online system. 1969, Stanford started using broadcasted courses on their television network. And in 1980, SuccessMaker was adopted in Albany, New York. SuccessMaker is now administered by Pearson, and they basically said that it provided elementary and middle school learners with adaptive, personalized tasks and used outcome-based data to optimize education. The Learning Manager was adopted in Alberta, Canada. It's basically the same concept, except it was the first of its kind in that it had test bank capabilities, so it could generate randomized tests. So in 1982, at Carnegie Mellon University, there was a very ambitious project. Gary, you might be familiar with this. I'm not sure if it's still exists or not. It was called the Andrew Project. It's basically a set of infrastructure and workstations that had 4 major software components. It had something called the toolkit, that you could use to create software. It had email service and message boards to distribute that software amongst teachers and students. It had a file system to locally store the software or the documents that were created, and it had something that would allow you to remotely display the documents at the different workstations around campus. And then skipping ahead to 1995 to 2005, this is where we saw the creation of a lot of the different learning management systems that we see today. WebWork, for example, that was created in 1995. If you went to Rutgers, New Brunswick, I know I had to use this to do calc. It's mainly for calc and statistics. In 2004, the Sakai project was created. This is widely used at Rutgers, New Brunswick as well, so some of you might have some experience with that. It's now being replaced by Canvas. Blackboard, we're all intimately familiar with at this point. It was created in 1997. They filed patents for it initially in 2000, and they were granted patents in 2005, 2006. So we also need to talk about whether or not this is effective, because this is the direction that things have been moving. So the Department of Education commissioned a meta-analysis on virtual classroom literature. They looked at 1,132 different abstracts that were written between 1996 and 2008. The main problem that they ran into was that they only found 176 published papers that had actual experimental or quasi-experimental studies within them. So that was one of their recommendations, was that there needed to be more studies. But nevertheless, they were able to find a couple things. They found that online classrooms performed modestly better than in-person classrooms. Online and in-person, meaning a mixture of the two approaches, resulted in better performance than either system individually. They found that having an instructor kind of supervise the online curriculum was more effective than self-directed learning. And they found that they identified 13 online learning practice variables They found that 11 of them were not statistically significant. The 2 that were significant were the mixture of online and in-person, and the instructor-led as opposed to the self-directed.
Okay, so as far as where we are right now with sort of online learning and classrooms of the future, new learning styles, an example is there's a program called Teach to One, which is implemented at some elementary level and middle school level programs. So one example is at a school in New York City, and basically what the program does is it combines human capital and technology, and they call it blended learning. So there are teachers in the room, but essentially there's like 60 kids at once in one giant room, and they go up to a screen at the beginning of the day. You can see the girl on the right, and that tells them where they should be sitting for the day. And then they go to their area, and they basically, it's all based off of an algorithm, so it's like self-directed learning. So when they log into their laptop, it will tell them like what their lessons are for the day. And there's about 15 schools using it right now in the United States. And most of the kids are doing individual work, but there is some group work that is led by instructors. It can be tricky. The instructors, some teachers like it and some don't, because they learn based off of what the children or the students learned the day before and the results based on the algorithm. They get their, basically what they're going to be teaching the next day that night before. So after that school day is over, based on what the children have learned, the algorithm tells them what lessons they're going to be working on the next day. So the teachers can't plan ahead, they kind of have to plan the night before, which can be difficult for work-life balance. The teachers also have these smart boards, so they can control them, and at the end of each lesson, the kids take a little 5-question quiz. They call it an exit slip, and that data sort of determines whether or not they grasp the concepts, and that's what goes into the algorithm to determine what their lesson plan will be for the next day. So what's great about it is every kid is always learning. No one's left behind because they're learning at their own pace. But it's also some of the criticisms of it are that it teaches mainly the standardized tests. So while the students in these programs generally are performing better based on standardized tests than in a regular classroom setting, it doesn't help them develop soft skills. So the algorithm can't measure whether or not they're learning critical thinking, if they're applying critical analysis, creativity levels. It's basically just, off of numbers. So it measures computational tasks. The teachers, it only will work well, the teachers are saying, if they still, they'll get a script for the group work, but they still need to be able to adapt that script to the student's abilities. So if there's a student that's not grasping a concept from the script, the teacher still has to go above and beyond to help teach that student. And some teachers have become lazy because of the script, and then they're not using that ability, so some students are actually getting left behind anyway. And it's really costly. This program at this particular school was a pilot program for 3 years that cost $9 million. So they don't know if it's actually cost effective. But they have found there's a couple schools that are in their second year of the pilot program, and those schools have done much better. They perform almost 50% better on standardized tests than the regular public school system. And yeah, basically that's the main criticism, is that it just teaches to standardized tests, so they can't tell if students are actually learning, and it's only been, the longest one has been only in effect for 2 to 3 years, so they can't tell their long-term effects going into high school and college.
Another type of virtual/online learning is MOOCs, which I know Andrea just mentioned. So they started in 2006, and they were initially designed to teach things like coding and computer science because it was an easy thing to teach through computers. But now they've expanded to teaching pretty much everything. They also started out free, and they're becoming no longer free, which I'll talk about in a minute. So they tend to be 8 to 12 minutes long per video, and they usually stop twice in the middle to ask questions to make sure that everyone is staying with the material. They're self-guided for the most part, and they usually come in sort of packages of like an entire lesson that's broken up, so you can go through them at your own pace. So one of the main benefits is that they're scalable and that they can be posted on YouTube. They're free to pretty much anyone. They're very popular because of their potential to be scaled to go to developing countries and help people who don't have the money to afford to go to universities learn a lot of the skills that they would get there. They also allow, because it's one class that's either recorded or done digitally, you can have the best of the best teach that class instead of having to be in school on a regular basis. So their resources for that individual class that's shared are very high. As I said, they're flexible, so you can take them at your own pace, you can take them wherever you are, and things like that. And they also help level the playing field because everyone's taking the same course in whatever style fits them best. And they're not expensive. So some of the criticisms are that they lack a good ability to measure, because the easiest way to administer the questions to make sure that everyone's keeping up are multiple choice questions, which one are not super in depth and aren't necessarily a good measure, but they're also very easy to cheat on. So that's one of the big things that they're working on now, is to come up with a way to track progress that also is harder to get away with cheating on when you're taking them. They're also working now on integrating them into universities so you could actually receive credit for taking MOOCs, which is another thing, again, with the high potential for cheating is difficult for a lot of universities to get behind. And then they lack a lot of personalized guidance because, again, it's a pre-recorded class and you're taking it on your own time, so they're working on ways to either have TAs take them with you or be available for questions. A lot of companies are also developing like study groups so people can meet and talk about the content in person while they're all doing the class together. And then, so one of the things I thought, this is essentially data on who takes these classes. One of the things that I thought was really interesting that I didn't think of ahead of time was the fact that most people that take MOOCs already have a bachelor's degree and are in their 20s and 30s. Also, most of them are from outside the United States, which I thought was interesting. So one of the things that I also thought was surprising was that the way MOOCs are now, being free and widely available, only about 4% of people actually complete an entire course. So one of the things that they're doing is they're starting to charge for them, and they found that the most effective way to get people to finish the course is to do it is to charge on a subscription basis. So you get a certain number of courses during a certain amount of time, and that time limit sort of encourages people to actually do all of the work and finish the classes, which sort of related to our Becker prep. They said they get much better results if you don't have unlimited time to complete the course. And then there are also the companies that run them, like Khan Academy, Coursera, are coming up with ways to implement social networking into the class, into the platform of the class itself, so that you can ask questions while you're taking it, and you can talk to classmates through the portal. And they've been working on different ways of how, like, the best visual way for people to learn. So I know, because I've watched a couple of Khan Academy videos, and the data's shown that people react much better when you see them like writing it out, even though it's virtual, as opposed to like seeing text on the screen itself. And the differences between seeing a person talking versus watching just what they're writing and all that kind of stuff. They're working through data to improve the results. And then a number of schools, including Harvard and MIT, are developing their own courses that they'll get credit for. I know Georgia Tech started a program where you can actually get your entire degree in computer science for $6,600 apparently, completely through those. So one of the next things in classrooms that is very new is the use of augmented and virtual reality. So this is a picture, sort of an example of how it's being used in the main sense, which is that there's like there's physical either murals or posters or existing pieces of art that then with an app, when you like slide over them, they give you extra information. So a lot of, I know one of the main ones there, the hope is for these to be used as like in museums and stuff like that, that when you're looking at a painting, you can get extra information without it physically being there. There's also ways where you can put it on your homework and like teachers will help you with the problem based on like what's already there. And then posters that will automatically send you to a form to fill out and that kind of stuff. I also saw an interesting article about specifically hearing impaired students being able to use this to get video like explanations of like vocabulary flashcards and things like that that normally we wouldn't need to see. They can get extra help with that. This is an example of one of the apps that already exist. So like you can't really see in the background, but that's just like a regular poster that would be hanging up in a classroom. And then as you hover on top of it, it sort of pops out and you can do all this stuff in front of what's already there. And then for VR, that allows an immersive learning experience where you're there through Google Cardboard or other sort of VR technology. You can learn things like history and marine biology by being able to like visually go somewhere that you can't physically go. This is a Kickstarter sort of page for a bunch of different VR like learning experiences. So they have a Titanic one, they have an Apollo one, usually it like showed cool examples visually. But essentially you can learn a lot more by being there, whether it be in ancient Greece or on the moon or under the water, things like that. So that's just one of the many ways that VR is also helping people learn.
Okay, so just a couple other examples of where this is going as far as education goes. Game-based learning, knowing that people have shorter attention spans now more than ever, and they like to be interconnected and doing multiple things at once. So they're taking an approach almost like they need to distract students from actually learning. So they're using these games to sort of distract them by exciting them that they're playing a game. There's also motion sensing devices, so like the Wii remote. There's also the PlayStation Move that are getting integrated into some classrooms as part of educational games. And then there's also a different approach on the opposite side called game design, where there's actually courses where they're having children design games because it actually integrates a bunch of different areas and expertise where the kids need to learn. So, for example, they use basic game designing skills without the complexity of programming, and it helps them develop skills like language, systematic thinking, problem solving. They'll do like simulations of trial and errors, storytelling, art and design. So it can integrate lots of different disciplines into one overall like semester-long or year-long project of designing a game. And then these multi-touch LCD screens, so they allow greater interactivity. They allow multiple people. This is basically would be replacing like in kindergarten or in elementary school when you actually set up like a table instead of individual desks. This is actually the surface of the table now.
So another big thing moving forward that we actually just talked about is the idea of biometrics. So biometrics, that's the science of analyzing physical responses that are being emitted by the human body. The best example of this is polygraph testing, where you're hooked up to a machine, they ask you questions, they monitor your pulse, your blood pressure, whether or not you're sweating, things like that, to determine if you're telling the truth or not. I know that they implemented this in Freehold recently. That was the most local example that I could find. They spent about $370,000 on a number of biometric technologies. So basically, in the educational context, the way that this works is it takes raw data that's gathered from webcams that are monitoring the students, and it translates it into information for the teachers. So for example, if a student is directly looking at the teacher, that will increase that student's individual engagement score. If they look down at their paper, it'll remain neutral if they're writing something down. And if they're looking out the window or something, then their score will decrease. Another good example of this, actually, that some of us might have experienced recently is the lockdown browser. In our business law class, we didn't have to use the webcam feature, but there is one installed on it that will make sure that you are looking at the screen and there's no textbook behind you or something that you would use to cheat on an online test. So we had some experience with that recently. The biggest problem with biometrics, however, is privacy concerns. I'm sure some of you have heard the story a few years ago. There was a school that gave out computers to all their students. This was obviously positively received until it was revealed that the school was actually monitoring the students' webcams 24 hours a day, even while they were at home. So that's an obvious reason for concern for the parents. It was a big story in the news. I'm sure some of you heard about it. The other big issue here is the cost of implementation. For example, Freehold Borough School District spent $370,000, but that's because they were given a grant, I think, by the Department of Education. Not every school district is going to be given a grant, and therefore they're going to have to increase their budgets. That's going to come out of the taxpayers' pockets, and that obviously costs a lot of profits. It's very controversial. But there are other uses, not just in the classroom itself, but I read something about one school district, I think in Canada, that is having kids scan their fingerprints when they get on the bus, and it will log where they got on and associate it with some kind of ID number, so to make sure that when they're going back home, they get off at the same stop. I thought that was very interesting.
And
There's
don't forget to get on the bus.
Exactly. Yeah. I know that they're using it to automate checkouts at the lunch line, which is important because depending on the size of your school, kids might spend a lot of time in line and not enough time actually eating or socializing with their friends, which is important in the middle of the day. And obviously they're using things like this in addition to metal detectors to make sure that schools are secure and that there are no unwanted visitors. So that's another important thing moving forward.
Okay. So we just got some discussion questions. Are you guys in support of the movement to virtualization and increased technology in the classroom, or what? How do you feel about it?
Who is in support? Show of hands. One. Okay. All right. So, as now. So, for some of you that aren't in support, do you mind sharing the reason? Tom and Al?
Well, I'm not against it, but to an extent, you have to be careful what's going on, because there seems to be a lot of trading off of myself to development of that. And like you just said, it's an important part of the day that help people try to, socialize with one, things like that. It seems that we're moving away from all socializing in the classroom or any type of human interaction, which it's efficient and people can learn a lot more, it's an equal playing field, but then it's almost like you get into the real world and you get smacked. It's a virtual world, and that's, unless everything else becomes like that, it's kind of set up for a rude way. So it's critical.
That's pretty much what I was going to say. Plus, I put out virtual learning, and I feel like, okay, I think that's good, we're all here, we all can work with that, so why change it?
technology at the same time. I know Bill Gates had a project years ago that created a technology school. Most of the things were technology based, but it didn't succeed as much as he thought it was going to do because of the teachers. They weren't accustomed to technology and they were reluctant to change. So I think technology is going to bring a lot of opportunities to less fortunate kids, or like they can have access to textbooks or stuff like that. They can have everything in their computers. I have seen a lot of videos of that, about it, so I think it's going to be a change. But at the same time, again, you mentioned the bit of how it was more efficient if you have space interaction and technology at the same time, instead of just having one or the other. Instead of creating both of them.
I know for example, from experience, I mean, when I was in middle school, my school board spent a ton of money putting smart boards in all over the place. They didn't teach the teachers how to use them, so they just sat there for most of them, or the teacher would do something and would freak out, and they don't. I think they ended up taking them out because they weren't using them, and I think smart boards also very quickly became pretty obsolete in terms of their technology. Whereas like they weren't touch screen enough to be really functional and all that kind of stuff.
They wanted one, so I'm not about to leave. This is good.
My Helmut's talk is very interesting, and I have a couple of slides here about things that we're trying. I proposed last year to do at graduates in the business school, and I call it the 8 pillars of wisdom. And I want to show you this, but before that, I want to do some couple of clicker exercise things about this lecture and try something here. So, can we just remember these 2 other questions? Okay, can you guys remember if I want to discuss them?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
significant impact. Do we care to share why? Couple of answers. Yes.
When we go into like audit analytics, we're gonna learn how we can use information technology, and we can go through all of the financial statements and we just pull out the exceptions.
Okay, thank you. One more response.
Yeah, I think we learn a lot about continuous auditing, and I think that becomes more and more like commonplace. Not to just that.
Yes, I like that.
Very good. And then last question. We've been doing this work a lot.
Study for the exam.
Of course. Okay. So a lot of those are going to study. We have a very good class. Very studious class.
You can't have to.
Well, it's other. Who wants to share the other?
Work.
Mark.
Going to work?
Yeah. How they
Thank you.
I keep forgetting this microphone's on.
Okay, this is a set of slides I presented in the faculty meeting a couple of last year. And basically I suggested to the dean, it was last year, about 2 years ago, a series of things that we should do in a business school. And apropos, I wasn't intending to show this today, but apropos the last presentation, I had there in the syllabus a discussion of future of education. And so the issue was very appropriate. And I just wanted to kind of go over these. And we made some drawings. Okay, and so the things that we talked about that is the virtual presence classroom, the digital library, what we call the school with a million courses, we call it SWAM. Student learning management system. I'm going to go over these in some detail for you to think about that. Artificial intelligence for education, mock. Remember we talked about mock trial, simulation of working environment, learning problems. Just to give you a status on this, we haven't done very well in the virtual presence classroom. The idea for that was, maybe I'll just go to this, no, that's okay. The idea for that was a classroom like this, with some screens in the back, and you could attend class from home. Okay, very simple kind of idea. I just wanted to pick up this classroom or some classroom and put Skype on it. Okay, very easy to do, very cheap. Cheap is good. Okay, couldn't get them to do it. But actually, I just heard from the technology guys here that by September we're going to have 2 classrooms like that. But they, of course, have to go with a much more expensive technology. Okay, so yeah.
Did they get a grant, or is the business school?
No, the business school is funded it.
Okay.
I don't think they got it, no. The digital library, we actually have done quite well with it. We're getting about 500,000 minutes watched. That thing that we're taking there is the digital library. And can you guys guess what is my major difficulty with the digital library?
Professors don't do it, and they don't like to use it. Like I think the digital library is good if the professor uses the flipped classroom approach, where students watch the lectures at home, and then the professor goes to the board model. But some professors don't want to do that.
Yeah, I think you are kind of in the ballpark. My major difficulty has been convincing professors to be paid.
Yeah, I was gonna say content, if you don't have anything to fill it up.
So why are people hesitant to be paid?
Oh, well, no, going back to your first question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, it's hard to engage with a professor. Like, I can watch your lectures as many times as I want, but if I have a question at that moment, at that instant, there's no way I can ask you. And because of life, I will forget to, I had a question at that moment.
Yeah. But the difficulty I have with not going to this is some professors don't want to be paid. And so my solution to that is having a person taping it and telling the professors, if you say something that you don't want to say, we'll cut it from the tape. And we won't post it immediately. I think there is, but we have, I would say, pretty much most of the courses in the business school now take. And so we did this semester, we're already planning next semester, choosing the ones we teach, and we're creating multiple copies, which is also a very interesting phenomenon. This thing, Swarm, you guys are going to experience it. We did it last year for the first time. And what is Swarm is basically modularized the audit analytics class, very small modules. And we are going to let you guys choose, not the entire course, but a little piece of the course, which modules you want to take with the advice of the instructor. So why do I say a school of million courses? Is because the combinatorics of many modules are infinite. So you'll be able to choose what you want to watch. This is something we wanted to do, and I don't think we wanted to do it as enthusiasts as the group described, of a camera watching people all the time, but we want a module in the back of Swarm seeing if people are progressing. Stanley Haley, one of our PhD students, created a set of questions for each one of the modules. And typically you go to a module, if you can't respond to the question, you have to go back and look at as many times as you can answer the questions. So this is a method. Another method would be to let people go by and give exam. There are many different methods that you can do this type of thing. But what we really would like to do is a dashboard that any time can tell you the progress of a student on the subject matter. And what we did was very, very tailored to Swarm. And we are thinking of redoing this, doing different software. Our dean has been extremely supportive of this. She asked me about a month ago to learn what she calls the hybrid education thing, which is, I guess not defined what it is, but the idea is supplementing education with other things. And so what we are going to do is we are going to go to each one of the departments and let the department decide how they progress on the visualization of their education. Okay? Because I didn't want to go and be aggravating everyone, say you have to do this, you have to do that. I just let them do their plans, and I don't want to run it. I will find someone to be the executor of it. I rather do research. But that's the idea at this moment. So she has been very, very supportive. She actually can ask a couple of these things. We didn't have to pay. We are nowhere in artificial intelligence devices for education. A couple of the departments in the business school already did a mock trial. My reaction to mock is what's different between very large experimentation and experimentation here. I don't see that much different. But the one problem with mock is what the group here said very well. What is the problem? Is that a lot of people have no support. And our former dean started these very large classrooms here at Rutgers, where we are teaching 200 students in a classroom. And I really oppose that. I usually say we have more than 30 students or 40 students in a classroom, give them a tape because there is no advantage to be in the classroom. And if you go and observe, I've done this, go and observe our large classrooms, let them be at home relaxing, okay? The issue is this, right? The issue is getting yourself to look at the thing and follow it and etc. But of course you can use technology to motivate them. Okay, this is something a couple of the firms have done, is they prepared tapes. They haven't done it with high technology, but say what does an auditor do with their engagement? Okay, and this one is the idea that you would have a little environment at home whereby you could attend classes and would be directed for that. And actually we did one of the capstone courses of one of our PhD students used virtual reality. And so she came, I take one of her classes, and then what we are trying to do is you are home, and it's like if you were in the environment with virtual reality. And that's the whole set of choices to be done on the technology there that we have to think about that. What Disha did is recorded the class, and you can sit at home and look around the class, etc. And we could have spent $5,000 on a camera from Cisco, but we actually spent $90 for a camera. And the camera sat over there and it's 180 degrees. Came out pretty decent, except the camera broke. And I had to order another one and the class finished. Okay? But Disha has an experiment, and I'm planning to show it to you, let you look at it. Okay? But actually what I really would like, and I want to hear from you, that's why I stopped this, because I wanted to have a discussion. What I actually was wondering if we shouldn't try to do this in a real-time environment, meaning you are at home, and instead of just participating as a listener, at least participate in a virtual reality world that you can see. I showed here last year a video, a virtual reality video that came out in the New York Times magazine. It was the first virtual reality thing that the New York Times published. And is two people climbing the Liberty Tower, where the World Trade Center was. And you can look down and nearly throw up and look side and etc. That's my son-in-law, Jimmy Chin, who was one of the two guys climbing that thing. And they have, and I'm going to bring you the little viewer and give you the URL of that thing and let you play with it a little bit. And I think you're going to see the power of virtual reality. Meaning is, if you don't like large altitudes, you're not going to feel too good. Even the film that they did, my daughter and Jimmy did, on the roof, is a climbing movie. Some people throw up in the movie theater or faint because they're not that big altitude under you. But imagine that in virtual reality. Okay, and I am not a great fan of virtual reality. I get dizzy with virtual reality, not altitude. I think the trick they use to give you the impression of that, I think most people have difficulty for doing that for a long period of time. I think technology will improve in that immersion type of technology. And so that's kind of our plans here. And actually telling it to you, I realize you're a little bit ahead, and I thought we were nowhere with this, but now I realize this is the idea of the TVs on the classroom. Okay. This is the digital library. You know, we have made quite a lot of progress in it. And by the way, the dean would like most departments to have their own digital library. But you have to think about the digital library a little bit deeper. Why? Because this kind of thing, who's going to benefit from the digital library? Yes. Oh, you already had your two questions.
No, I'm answering your question.
Oh, okay.
So in the long run, it will be more beneficial for us because it saves time. We get to watch a lecture at home, and then you get to show us how some of the theories are applied in the classroom.
So you're talking about more the flip kind of thing, correct?
I think the major benefit eventually is going to be from someone in Malaysia or in Africa that doesn't have access to that type of education. And when we designed this, the whole idea was that I was going to send Ron, who was one of our PhD students, to travel to exotic universities and say, you don't have a master's program, you can use this space and give it your own degree. We never did that, but the library did grow, and it has to be English language. And about half of the people are from other countries. So that's the basic idea we have around this. What's happening out there? Everyone's oh, it's raining. Oh, sweet. They say it's going to be raining today, but short periods of time. Okay, so that's the library. We actually have started looking at what people are using, and if you look at the Pearson package, they actually have a little bit of word identification and etc. Very pedestrian technology. I have strong feelings against multiple choices. I think multiple choices are not very good for developing logical thinking. I want to ask you a question I always ask when we are talking about this, is what should people memorize in the age of Google? What should people memorize for the CPA exam on the age of Google?
Can't use Google with maybe a point of view or actually do it, but not the definition, the options. I always use Google when I was first.
Actually, you need to memorize everything because they don't give you access to Google. Yeah. Okay? But in theory, what should I tell the CPA exam folks that they should do?
If they could somehow cater the exam to the actual application of ideas and not necessarily the
They
memorization
claim
of
they
it.
did it for this year. They claim that 40% of the exam is more analytic. Okay? I haven't taken the exam, I don't have the feeling, but what they showed me, I wasn't terribly convinced. But let's suppose we could decide what it is. What do you think that should be, actually what should we make her know by the time she takes the PhD exam? I mean, I'll tell you one thing, the half-life of memorization of accounting rules is about 2.5 years. So in 5 years you have forgotten 80% of it. So what would be the solution to this?
Teaching range of different types of rules so they can learn any rule and apply any rule.
So teaching you how to learn rules, not teaching the rules itself.
The rules don't matter. It's learning how to apply the rules. Understand the rules. Not saying the rules, they don't matter. It's really understanding a rule because you're going to change anyway and learning how to apply that rule correctly.
Have you tried to figure out a rule of accounting using Google? Not easy, not designed for them. But of course, this is a business opportunity for her. She can prepare a knowledge base, organizing direction of resolving accounting rules, or resolving accounting situations. Business opportunities, someone will do this for sure. Okay, but I think that Tom's point is well, you know, this kind of what they call logical thinking, analytic thinking, etc. People think that's one abstract thing. It's actually much more oriented towards topics. And if you learn how to do something, even if the rule change somewhat, you can still do it.
That's interesting.
Maybe we should try something like that in a company.
And that's 25% of the work.
I didn't know that. That's very interesting. You know, maybe last month, Hussein and me presented to NASC, the National Association of Boards of Accountancy. They basically control everything, and the exam people told us that they can't change anything with their agreement. And I think I made some progress on getting them to introduce analytics in the exam. And you guys will have the advantage of that because you'll be better prepared than most people. But it's a long battle, and maybe that's something we should be looking. So basically, in this area of AI application, I haven't found anything that's really working. Okay, and I think the discussion here of Marx was a very, very good discussion. I don't think I need to add anything to that. Maybe it was 2 years ago because talking of September 2015. Some things for she won't have been doing that. I think so what should we do in PA about remote learning, in your opinion?
I think at a minimum, introducing remote learning technologies would be helpful. Because I think most of the people in this class are commuters, and there's various things that can keep us stuck at home, or at least not here. So having the availability to attend class remotely and be able to participate to some extent. Like before this, I was in a different university with a part-time MBA program. And if someone couldn't attend class, they would set up a laptop with a microphone and a camera on it, so they could communicate.
So the remote classroom resolves a little bit the absence problem because you can see the student in the back. But you think that your learning of the group would be better if half of you would be away? What do you think of that?
Some people can be distracted by the things that they're not in class to see people or focus, whereas like with technology you might be distracted by something else. So I guess it's more of a case that has the individual what they're studying habits on, what the best way for them to learn is.
What do you think, Claudia? She's not asking the questions, I have to ask her. Keep thinking about it, tell me later. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
I just think it limits interaction. If you had half the class weren't here, if you wanted to have a spirited discussion or an argument, say, if half the people weren't here, then I think it's more limiting.
Yeah, but maybe you can use technology to improve the ability to interactively converse, but it's not the same thing. You are going to say something?
Well, being a non-traditional student and in the business school, I find it very difficult to take all of my classes and make a living at the same time. So I did have online classes at the community college, and it made it so much easier. I think they need to, and given one of the presentations said that it was both online and in the classroom that they found the most benefit.
That's what our dean talks about, hybrid education. That's what she's thinking. Amanda, what do you think? You never say anything.
Well, I took as an undergrad, I did hybrid classes, and I think I got more out of it than, because like you had a chance to study by yourself and then ask questions when you met in class.
Okay, clear.
I like the hybrid as well. When it was all online, I just found myself more just like trying to get it done out of the way and focus on my in-class stuff and not like learning and retaining information. That's just how I feel about total 100% online as opposed to 100% in class and hybrid. So I like the hybrid mix because all of us, like we commute, some of us work, we're busy people. Like we're students and trying to make a living, and yeah, that's my take on it.
Is the trade-off live and remote, or there are other forms of trade-offs? Did you understand my question?
Oh. So when you put everything online, art museums are really good at doing this, where they put in their whole collection online, so people can look at art online. But you lose the experience of looking at art. So I actually have a friend who's an artist, so he's been drawing these images in 3D, and so you actually have to be there physically in order to truly enjoy art. And so that's something that technology can replace. Is something that you can enjoy by looking at it yourself in person.
How about experiential learning? And I think that's what you're talking about a little bit. Experiential learning is whereby you go to KPMG and work on an engagement as a student or etc. Is that another form besides remote and local? Very difficult to organize. You don't think that KPMG would give non-disclosure agreements and all kind of difficulty. Very difficult. I have seen this for 20 years. People trying to do that. It's very difficult to make it happen. I want to ask you another question or two. Why do the firms hire you here or in other universities, and then they basically give a lot of education when you get there? Isabel?
By being here, we're showing that we can learn how to learn, what Tom's saying. So by choosing people that have college degrees in the field or graduate degrees, they're hoping that teaching us what they want to teach us will be easier because we know how to learn.
Okay, so you think it's a pre-selection?
Yeah.
I think it's because each company do business differently, and they want to train you at, let's say, the one.
We want to do it the E&Y way.
Yeah, they want you to do it their way. They don't want you to do it the Rutgers way. They want you to do it the right way, the KPMG way.
Or maybe what we are teaching is not the right things to teach. I don't like that.
I think something along the lines of that. Not necessarily things to teach, but in school, with any profession, or any job really, you don't learn it until you do it. You have no idea what you're doing until you go through it. So it doesn't matter. We're going to become accountants, and the first few months not know what's going on. And everything that we learn here will let us do the basics when we're looking at it financially, whatever it is we're doing. But in terms of knowing what to do, there's no way of knowing that until we actually experience it. That's why we have to teach it.
Going back to what you said, President Concept, when we had the presentation with Becker, one of the people said that what she studied for the CPA exam wasn't what she had learned at work. So she was having trouble differentiating what CPA prep course was saying and what actually real life was saying that we do. So I feel like once you go to those firms, you have to learn their way, or how actually implemented that classroom is learn that teaching the concept and the theories. We have to abstract thinking like how we do it, but we haven't actually do it by hand. So we have to learn.
Is PA MBA the way to pass the CPA exam? Yes?
It's very helpful. You need it.
What do you think, Alice?
Well, at the alumni event, one of the alumni specifically said that he doesn't think this program set him up well for the CPA, and he wanted to talk to Snell about somehow implementing more CPA information into the course.
When I was at Columbia, the department chairman said, here is not the place to prepare for the CPA exam. You go and take backup for them. That's what he used to say. I don't think we say that, but I think some people think that. Now, if I was preparing you for the CPA exam, you wouldn't get any analytics at all. But there is no analytics in the exam. So So what do you think of that?
I think that's the same problem that elementary and middle schools are having with standardized testing, where it's like if you teach just what's on the test, then you don't actually really learn anything other than answers to test questions. So like this teaches us
And
that.
the CPA test is not a very good preparation for the career. You know the way they prepare the CPA exam? They, every 6 years run, or 7 years, run a survey of what first and second year staff are doing and try to base the exam on that. So you think that the staff 7 years from now, or 6 years from now, are going to be doing the same things that they are doing today? Tools particularly now are changing rapidly. So that's an interesting question.
I don't know a little bit different because whether this is good for CPA, this is an MBA program, so that's different than CPA.
Yeah, that's a clear answer. That's a clear answer. That's there is a certain point that an MBA versus undergraduate. Certainly, that's not the main target. And the interesting question is, pass rates for undergraduates here at Rutgers have gone down substantially, which I don't know what it means. Maybe a more research-oriented faculty with less connection to the profession. Let me ask another couple of questions. I'm trying to challenge the paradigm here. You know what I would call it the Silicon Valley model? Silicon Valley model. What's happened in Silicon Valley? You think you have to have a degree in computer science to be an employee at Apple? Either.
Not necessarily. They're pretty much just hiring anybody who can do the work, regardless of how you're going to do it.
And okay, so what are people doing to get those jobs?
Well, Silicon Valley, they have a ranking of which schools that their employees come from. The majority of like the employees, they come from like Stanford or UC Berkeley or universities in the Bay Area. I think the University of Maryland, which is on the East Coast, is like the top 25 list. So you just have to go to the school at Stanford or UC Berkeley.
Do you have to go to school to be hired by these companies? Christian, what do people do to get this degree?
They just acquire the skill.
How do they do that, Christian? Yeah, that's what a lot of people are doing. They focus on learning Python, R, whatever that is, and they take online courses, maybe Coursera, or maybe they pay a lot of money for a specialized course. And that's an interesting thing. Okay.
Yeah, I have a friend that was working at Rutgers New Brunswick, and he dropped out halfway through his computer science degree. He did one of those coding boot camps. It was like a couple months
Coding
long.
boot camps,
Yeah,
good.
and then he got a job at Tumblr, and he makes a ton of money now. Tumblr.
Let me just add an item here for you to think. 2 years colleges, 4-year colleges, versus, let's say, PhDs, just to add something this, plus another 4 years, 8 years, or 10 years. Okay? You know, a lot of people are arguing that these structures are inadequate. Okay, the BS, AA, PhD are not the way to think about education. What do you think about that?
I think it depends on the field, like how much time you want someone spending on learning what they're doing. I think for doctors, getting their PhD and doing residency and all that is still very important, because they're taking care of people's lives. You want them to spend a lot of time practicing it. But there are things, I think also in certain industries like the tech industry, jobs are getting so specialized that once you learn how to do that specific thing, you can market that skill and you don't necessarily need to have taken 4 classes in history and philosophy that a lot of people need undergrad degrees.
I think kind of going off on that, the degree system still has some semblance of a place, just because you know, generally by looking at the degree, how well-rounded that education was or how specified it was. Like if you're
So as a credential, maybe.
Right. Like if you look at my bachelor's degree, I think 36 credits went towards my major out of 120 credits. And that's a lot of other things that I just went through and learned that made my education more well-rounded. Whereas I could have taken 36 credits, put that towards an associate's degree, and had I not taken all those core classes, I would have that direct knowledge. But then you can question whether or not I had a well-rounded education and was a rounded individual.
When I just finished my, let's say, undergraduate education, people were going through this whole discussion about what should be in undergraduate degrees. And basically, the consensus at that time is that 2 years should be generic education. And then the other 2 years would be more concentrated. But that doesn't match at all the coding bootcamp idea, correct? You need this idea that you have to go and study all kind of liberal art courses in the first 2 years. Still makes sense.
I think it depends on what you look for in your people. Like for me, I have a liberal arts degree. Like I have a Bachelor of Arts in English. And what I learned in class, I didn't necessarily use pretty much ever in my career. But it taught me how to think and taught me how to challenge ideas. And through things like that, I was
If
able
you
to
had
explore
taken all, let's say, business courses, concentrated business course, would you have learned less how to think?
Not sure.
No, meaning this is the dilemma we are facing now, correct? Isn't this the question of today's education? I actually think this is kind of obsolete. But I think it will take a long time to change, basically because professors don't change that easy. What do they say? It's easier to reorganize a cemetery than a university. That's just a joke, but it's a very interesting question. The other thing, when I was at Columbia, they had this concept. They called it post-entry level education. And I think it was something that they were trying to just sell more graduate courses. But the idea was a lifetime education type of thing. Now, the CPA career has a CPE requirement. You know that, correct? What is the CPE requirement? 40 hours of education per year, isn't that it? But you can get those, I think it's 40 or 20 per year.
It's 40.
40?
Yeah.
40. But you can take gambling boat to Las Vegas, to abandon load for Bahamas, and get credits. Okay? The most ridiculous kind of things get CP. Isn't that true, Andrea?
Not to that extent, but close, yes.
No,
you,
no, to
you
that
can
extent,
take
I
it
see
in
that.
anything, any conference,
And then you
pretty
get
much.
few lectures and accounting, and the rest of the time is gambling.
Right.
Okay. I actually, when I talked to NASA, I put this, I said, you know what you should do is force people to do a career plan, and tie up CPE, meaning that this free for all CPE is ridiculous in this age where knowledge, people talk here about knowledge becoming more and more specialized. And the generic 2 years liberal arts education, which I believed all my life on, might not be appropriate. Okay? Create someone that is a wide knowledge person for very narrow, deep specialization curriculum. But there are certain things you need to know. You need to know how to read and write, correct? You need to know some basic arithmetics. Yes or no? You have a calculator. Why do you need a basic arithmetics? And I'm going to say one more thing you need to know. You need to know to program a little bit. colleagues who argue for that say because it takes a certain way of thinking that forces you a logical, rational way of thinking is good experience. It teaches you to think. And of course, people talk about logical thinking or in all domains. Now, I will say another thing that's going to upset you maybe a little bit. Residential learning. Is a luxury. Okay, undergraduates that go and live 4 years on campus, there's more for the drinking than for anything else. I'm joking, but it's an interesting question, correct? What I think what's going to happen is distance is going to be progressively taking more and more of the education role. For ecological reasons, for the reason, I always use this example. Okay, you're teaching a course. What's the value of someone going to Essex Community College or any community college, and he teaches 4 times intermediate accounting every semester, repeats the same stuff over and over again. It's like a machine of repeating. Okay, that's what happens. You go to the community college, or the people we hire here to teach on a part-time basis, what we call the lecturers, they are basically repetition machines. There is some value of learning that they actually teach several times, but after a while, you get pretty tired of it, correct? Pretty jaded about it. Now, compare that with hiring the best professor, okay, giving him all the video capabilities he has, and updating his examples every day with current things, and investing $1 million on the development of the course. What do you want to do? The presential course, or you want to do the remote course? And then the group talked about what was Georgia Tech and the $6,000. Georgia Tech. Okay, and actually I have written this. You can see my articles easily 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Is that I think this is going to be a different price type of education, and some of the stuff that is really well developed and constantly updated certainly is preferential to the poor guy teaching 4 courses at a time. There is a value for personal attention. There is a value for tailored attention. And each one of these can be priced separately. There is a tremendous value. You call the attention here, although you didn't emphasize it, of the interaction. But those things can be, technology can help. And progressively technology will help more and more and more. And what we are going to be is in a stage of transition, maybe a faster and faster. For example, I'm not that crazy about mocks these days. I was very interested in mocks 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Okay, great, take education to the masses, and et cetera, et cetera. But what's different between mocks and courses that we take and distribute? Unless you can create that component of personal attention, good personal attention, and maybe good technological support on the personal attention, I don't see too much of a difference. And just because it's produced by MIT doesn't necessarily mean it's better. I was a student at MIT, so I know a little bit about education. Great place, but researchers are not necessarily the best teachers, including myself. Okay, so that's the scenario on education that I think we need to think a little bit about. I actually like a lot this model. I have been teaching on PA and MBA since I joined Rutgers over 20 years ago. And because I like it, classes are small, there is dialogue, the subject that I teach is state of the art, So there is no competition for a line, and et cetera, That's, I like the model. But residential learning is a luxury, and maybe democratic societies should make everyone get a certain degree, much larger number of years of education, and provide it on an electronic basis. And I think if this thing develops the way it should, this will be a big equalizer in education between countries and between regions. And in subject matters, the pressure is going to be for harmonization of what subject matters do. You know, accounting standards here, accounting standards there, accounting standards there. Will be pressure to be reasonably similar. But expecting that the community of Milan, Italy, will change their tax rules to satisfy international standards, you're going to dream about it. It's not going to happen. It's about personal interest, local interest, and etc. Okay. I'll kind of let you go. Now, have a nice, don't eat too much barbecue. Or eat too much barbecue, and you should. And I'll see you next week. And let's thank Professor Paulo for Hey guys, I like the presentation. This was a great start for presentation. They were intellectual, they were all organized, and the speakers were good.